special discussion for creating awareness about the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on the Blue Nile River. And as you may know, the GERD has a great importance to Ethiopia and even all other East African region. And recently, it has been also become a source of tension between specifically Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan. And I think in this webinar, we will have the opportunity to know about the characteristics of this project, the history, and all other related issues. So first, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our guests and panelists in this webinar. We have here Honorable Ambassador Diriba Kuma, Ambassador of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia to Sweden and other Nordic countries, who is based in Stockholm. We have also here Lemlem Fisaha, who is the Director General of the International Legal Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have also 3 panelists in here, which actually they will introduce themselves later on. But we have Dr. Admasu Gabayew, a professor of practice and international consultant in water resource engineering. We have also Dr. Mulgeta Zelelau, a senior hydrologist and water resource engineer. We have also Dr. Emmanuel Ujunju, a senior hydrologist and a hydrologic engineer as well from Uganda. So we will hear from them in a few minutes. I would like also to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this webinar. I would like to acknowledge the Ethiopian Common Forum in Norway, and also a great contribution of the Ethiopian community in Norway, the Ethiopian Embassy, as well as the Ethiopian Norwegian Professional Organization, IMPO. So with this, just a few, we hear from a keynote remark from Honorable Ambassador first, and we go to the panelists later on. The plan we have is we have about 25 minutes for each of the presentations, and we'll show them a signal like 2 minutes before to wrap up their presentation. And if there are any questions, and hopefully they will, and any comments or any reflections, we'll give a chance at the end of the presentations. And we do this by both, you can raise your hand and ask questions, and at the same time, you can send your questions on chat. So with this, I will first give the opportunity to address a keynote speech by the Honorable Ambassador Diriba Kuma.
Thank you very much. From the outset, I would like to welcome all the participants. I would also like to extend my sincere thanks and my heartfelt gratitude for the Ethiopian Common Forum and GERD Support Group in Norway for organizing such a very important event. As all of you may know very well, Nile River is one of the precious transboundary river resource Ethiopia is endowed with, even though because of various reasons, we couldn't be able to utilize it in the past time. It touches 70% of the livelihood of our community all over the country. It also covers 2/3 of our surface water potential, and also it is the more than 70% of the energy generation capacity of our nation. We have 25 million people living under poverty line in our country, which demands an urgent action to overcome by the government and through the effort of our community. And also 65 million population having no access to modern electricity in our country, which really this will contribute to the poverty, particularly for those who live under a severe poverty line. So millions of Ethiopians, millions of our citizens are waiting with a great hope for the completion of the dam, and also so that we know many Ethiopians contributed to financially and in idea for the construction of the dam. And so the hope is very high. They want to see the dam is completed and really have a contribution in improving their livelihood. GERD is not a water consuming facility. It simply helps to generate electricity for our country. The impact that GERD has on reducing water for the downstream countries is very, very small. It's insignificant in real terms. Over the past 8 years, our government has committed itself to a peaceful negotiation and with Sudan and Egypt on equitable and reasonable utilization of the Nile water based on international law and the principles. The negotiation has continued up to now, and it will also continue in the future, I hope, with the help of our African friends, particularly His Excellency President Ramaphosa and our African friends who have been participating in this negotiation over the past few weeks will help these things to be resolved in the future. Most of the technical issue related to the filling and operation of the dam has fairly really agreed, one can say. What is left is on the legal and administration issues, and that will be really, we hope that will also be solved. So I hope with the today's discussion will highlight and inform the Norwegian medias, Norwegian government officials, and our community in Norway to understand the real agenda and the rational point that Ethiopia is enforcing, and will help to really create a good understanding among our society, so that they will march with us in the process, and then a global advocacy, and particularly in the Nordic country, will be a good instrument to inform communities and also politicians and the media people to march with us, to work with us, and to inform all concerned bodies. And so I would like to once again thank you. And I also wish you a very nice deliberation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for the keynote speech. And as clearly stated, what GERD means to Ethiopians, and also the impact of GERD on the region, and the current negotiation going on to resolve some of the issues have been highlighted. And we thank you so much, Ambassador. Before we go to the next speaker, I got a message on chat that I have not introduced myself. My name is Tafari Demise. I work here at the Berknas Center for Climate Research and also for ILRI Ethiopia, and I'm a climate scientist. If there are any issues related to legal matters, as I introduced earlier, we have also Lemlem Fasav, who is the Director General of the International Legal Affairs from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, So we will have answers if there are any issues related to legal. And as you can see from the panelists, we have also people like Emmanuel, who is originally from Uganda, to show our this GERD issue and the Nile issue is not just an Ethiopian issue, but it's a regional issue. So we will hear from him later on. Now we go to the first presenter, Dr. Mulgeta. The floor is open for you.
Can you give me access for sharing my screen?
You are granted.
Okay. Okay, and thank you everyone for the introduction and nice message. I will start by saying a few words about myself. And my name is Mulgeta Bereddelelo. I'm a hydrologist and water resource engineer. I got a BSc degree from the former Arba Minch Water Technology Institute, now the Arba Minch University, and master's degree in hydropower development from Norwegian University of Science and Technology in 2004, and a PhD degree in hydrology in 2012 from the same university in the area of Anget catchment hydrology. When I was at Arba Minch, I worked at Arba Minch University in different capacities, teaching, research, consulting, and administrative duties. For the last 7 years, I've been with Multiconsult Norway as a senior hydrologist and water resource engineer. So my work at Multiconsult includes hydrological studies for hydropower development projects, design flood analysis for infrastructural and other relevant projects, river system modeling and analysis, dam break analysis and flood studies, spatial data analysis, and also I've been a project manager on some of the projects I've been involved with. I'm a certified engineer to do hydrological and hydraulic analysis by the Norwegian University, by the Norwegian Water and Energy Directorate. Currently, I'm a senior hydrologist at Multiconsult Norway. I'm a team of a group of the team of the GERD support team in Norway, and we do analysis and reflect our opinion, and this is also a part of the same initiative. My presentation title is GERD Project and its significance for Ethiopia and the region. So I use these bulleted points to guide you through the to my presentation, why this webinar was necessary to do, and we'll have some ideas about the colonial era water sharing treaties and initiatives and the hydrology of the Ethiopian catchments contributing to the Nile and the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam as it is now, and GERD's contribution to Ethiopia and the region, and Egyptians' claims and the need for a shared responsibility. And I will summarize my presentation with a summary. Following Egypt's attempt to internationalize the project, the GERD project, there has been massive media coverage. Some of them are really not helping, but reporting in a very misleading way and biased and unbalanced manner. And some have presented in a fairly good manner. And the issue of GERD has also been discussed in Norwegian media. So we felt that we need to deliver the rightful information to the international community, and our group is working on that to give the rightful information if it is if we are asked to deliver whenever possible. Regarding all the disputes that arises about this project and other development projects in the Nile Basin, it actually emanates from the colonial era treaties, which are bilateral treaties signed by two bodies, and excluding the other 9-10 countries in the basin. And the first treaty that was signed by Anglo-Egyptian was the 1929 treaty, which allocated 48 billion cubic of water to Egypt and 4 to Sudan, but nothing to other riparian countries. This was also further strengthened in the 1959 Egypt-Sudan agreement. Again, Ethiopia is not a part, despite that Ethiopia is contributing about 87% of the Nile flow. It is excluded from these agreements. However, Ethiopia has rejected all of them, all of these treaties. And the first of its kind agreement was between Egypt and Ethiopia. It's not an agreement, but it's a framework for cooperation. Was signed in 1993 by the late Prime Minister Meles Zenawi of Ethiopia and Hosni Mubarak of Egypt. And this was considered as Egypt's recognition of Ethiopia's right to use Nile water for its development. But then Egyptians announced Toshka project in 1997, which diverts water from Nile, from Lake Nasser to a different water course. This is out of the natural course of the Nile River. Angered by the hegemonic attitude of Egypt, the Nile Basin countries initiated an initiative that cooperation is the best way to go forward and to utilize and the Nile water in a sustainable manner. And the Nile Basin was created in 1999, and a cooperative framework was tabled in 2010. If this framework is signed by 6 countries and ratified by 6 countries, and then it will be a law governing the development of projects in the Nile Basin countries. But disappointed by Egypt's attitude, Ethiopia has announced the GERD project in 2011. This actually surfaced due to the fallout of a negotiation of funding for a project for 5 cascade projects on the Blue Nile as a part of the subsidiary action plan of the Nile Basin Initiative. Then Ethiopia announced this project to do it alone, and that has also become a source of dispute. And Egypt considered this dam as a threat and existential threat, but Ethiopia considers this as a development project. Ethiopia has also initiated for analysis of the design documents and construction procedures by the international panel of experts. which the group has delivered its report in 2013. And following that, the Declaration of Principles was signed in 2015. So the 1993 and 2015 signatures were the ones which were considered as the only agreements between Egypt and Ethiopia, and also in 2015 by including Sudan. Since then, there is a war of words particularly from Egypt. Several attempts for negotiation have been done. Still, in the tripartite negotiation is ongoing. But let's look at a little bit toward the agreements. What is stated in 1993, the most important one is the utilization of Nile water has to be dealt with principle of rules and principles of international law. And the agreement is also considered as Egypt's recognition for Ethiopia's right to use Nile water. And Ethiopia has also relied upon on this agreement when launching the GERD project. The 2015 Declaration of Principles is actually as a follow-up of 1993 agreement, and geared mostly towards the implementation of principles on GERD project. So again, its emphasis disputes have been, or utilization have been, should have been dealt with principle of international law, and the ones which are highlighted here are very important and relevant to the project, and these have been also a source of discussions. Preventing significant harm utilizing the Blue Nile, equitable and reasonable utilization, cooperation on guidelines and rules on the first filling of GERD in parallel with the construction of the dam and annual operation plan for the GERD. Confidence building, dam safety, peaceful settlement of disputes with negotiation, engagement, and if necessary, with mediation. But now let us look at the Nile's, Ethiopian Nile water hydrology, because it's very important to look at this in order to understand the characteristics of the project. As I have said before, Ethiopia contributes about 87% of the Nile water, which happens to be also 87 billion cubic meter per year from its three largest river basins in the west part of the country. And the Blue Nile, where the GERD is being built at the outlet of the water source near to the Sudanese border, contributes 50 billion cubic, on average 50 billion cubic water every year. And the Nile basin, the Nile part of Ethiopia, is actually 70% of the total water potential in Ethiopia. And GERD is built on one of the tributaries, or the main tributaries of the Nile. That is the Blue Nile, or the Abay in an Ethiopian context. So it covers the Nile, the Blue Nile, Baro, Kobo, Tekeze, and Merib, covers 70% of the total water resource potential of Ethiopia, and covers 40% of the total area of the country. As you see, this green or yellow part of the shaded area. And it's home to 48 million people, which is nearly the same as the population of Kenya. And 64% of our potential is also located in this basin, and 52 to 54% of potential irrigation land is also located in this region. So you can see that the Ethiopian catchments contributing to the Nile are the main natural resources of Ethiopia, and the dispute is on this one. The Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam was actually announced in 2011 in April, but the mobilization has begun at the end of 2010. It was supposed to be completed in 2017-18, but it has been delayed for several reasons. A new date is now set that the dam will be completed, or the project will be completed in 2023. And it's 100% hydropower project. That means that water goes through the turbines and produce energy, and water is going back again to the river and will continue its journey to Sudan and further to Egypt. So, however, the flow will be regulated. It will not be a natural flow, but more or less the annual average flow at Sudan and Egypt will be the same. It's publicly funded projects because due to the fallout of the negotiation before the initiation of the GERD between the Eastern Nile countries to build cascade of projects on Ethiopian Nile part, and the government has come with a plan, a financing plan that is to initiate a public fund. So citizens abroad and in the country buy bonds and with a specified maturation period, and I will get the money back, included together with the interest when that maturation period is over. It's a gravity dam. It has two dams actually, and saddle dam, the eastern part of the reservoir, and the main dam, which is across the river, which has a height of 140 meters to the full supply level and 155 to the top of the dam. And the storage capacity is 74 billion cubic meter cube. And it's about 1.5 times the annual flow of average annual flow of Nile. And the installed capacity is 5,150 megawatt. This is revised in 2018. Before it was over 6,000, but the energy level is the same. The energy production level will be the same. The current status, the civil structure is almost nearing completion. So do you see that this is the picture on the left is the cross-sectional view of the main dam and the river, and the picture on the right is the current status of the reservoir behind the dam. So the dam, the exterior banks, the banks of the dams are now completed, constructed to its final stage, but the central stage is only the central level, the section of the dam is only constructed or raised to about 60 meters above the riverbed level. So it's natural that impounding should occur behind the dam during this rainy season of Ethiopia. So the first filling, stage filling, has been completed, which is about 5 billion BCM. And Mother Nature was also in agreement with the filling plan, and the filling was actually carried out in a relatively very short time period. So GERD contribution is huge to Ethiopia. Ethiopia has many many development challenge, and one of the stumbling stone was a delivery of energy. And the picture on the left is the installation capacity, the current installation capacity together with the GERD, and the picture on the right is the energy generation capacity together with a GERD. As you can see, currently Ethiopia has an installation capacity of a little bit over 4,000 megawatt. This is actually from 15 hydropower projects built in the last 60, 70 years. And compared to the GERD 1 project, with installation capacity of 5,150 megawatt and energy generation capacity of 15,760 gigawatt hour per year. This tells us that the existing system has a very high system loss and the productivity level is very low. Very often it's very usual that power blackout is very often in Ethiopia. As a result, electricity is rushing on a regular basis, even during this rainy season. Ethiopia has also a problem delivering basic services to its citizens. The picture on the left you see is a number of people which are out of access to energy, without access to energy, electric energy. So about 60 million people in Ethiopia are not connected to grid. So they still live on, they still continue their traditional life inherited for their ancestors. Despite the country has a huge potential, this service has not been delivered for many years. And we hope that GERD will electrify the country and all the citizens will get the electricity they need so that they can improve their lives and also overcome the economic challenge. On the picture on the right is the electric power consumption per capita. As you see, for Ethiopia, currently for Ethiopians, it's less than 100 kilowatt per hour, and compared to 1700 and more for Egyptians. Of course, we have a huge climatic difference, but this also arises that there are no sufficient infrastructures in Ethiopia to deliver this development challenge. And of course, all other countries surrounding Ethiopia have a similar challenge. That is, they don't have such excessive energy to drive or the business as it's supposed to be. And the population growth in Ethiopia is about 2.6% per year. And due to that low access of energy to the people, so people are using the forest as a means for energy, a source of energy, and this is the usual phase that we see almost a daily basis in Ethiopia. And many live as source of income and also a source of energy. And the right and the picture on the right is how most Ethiopians prepare food. And you see, this is a challenging issue when it comes to health and improving the economic life of citizens. Apart from electrifying energy, the citizens of Ethiopia and promoting industrial development in Ethiopia, the GERD is also has a promising output for the region. Since all of the countries around Ethiopia has not been connected very much to the grid, so GERD will also contribute to the challenge of the neighboring countries. Of course, Ethiopia delivers energy, export electric energy to Sudan and Djibouti, and receives a good amount of revenue every year. A power grid project is being undertaken between Kenya and Ethiopia, and soon Kenya will also get the energy from Ethiopia. The picture on the right is the plan for grid connection in the Eastern Africa. This is actually got this figure from the Eastern African Power Pool, which is stationed in Ethiopia. This organization will oversee the power trade in the region in the future. Sudan every year faces a huge amount of flood, and that is also occurring very frequently. And in this year also, it has been reported that there was huge amount of flood coming to Sudan, and many villages were flooded. So, and then I believe the GERD project will alleviate this problem, that the occurrence of frequent floods in Sudan, since the flow from GERD will be regulated, and this problem will become maybe history. GERD has many benefits to the region. So uplift energy production development of run-up hydropower projects in Sudan, preserving of water in Ethiopia reduces the water loss by up to 12% in Aswan. It also traps most of the sediment from highlands of Ethiopia and prolong the service life of reservoirs in downstream countries. It also contributes to carbon emission reduction, creates climate resilience to manage drought and floods by serving as a water bank.
You have 2 minutes, Dr. Mulgeta.
Okay. But despite this is the fact on the ground, Egypt has many claims which are not actually founded on facts. And one of the claims Egypt made during the negotiation, very often on the media, they say that Ethiopia has an abundant rainfall. The figure on the left you see is the hydrograph, the flow of water on monthly basis at the GERD project site. As you can see here, at this, the hydrograph is a single peaked hydrograph, and it mainly occurs during the major rainy season during June to August. And as you see, the rainfall hydrograph is also coming in the same time frame. This is to show that it's the same amount of rainfall that goes to in our rivers. So that means we cannot talk one parameter and use it differently. So it's the same amount of rainfall which is going back to the rivers and again flowing back to downstream countries. Because the rainfall in Ethiopia is very erratic, and it's a mountainous country, and there is very little time for the water to infiltrate into soil, and almost every water drop will end up in the river, and then it will go out of the country. And above all, 80 to 85% of the annual flow occurs during the rainy season. This means that if you don't have reservoirs in Ethiopia, we cannot prolong the availability of water throughout the year. Ethiopia is considered the wet region for most of its, particularly in the Nile Basin. But on a normal year, as much as 5 to 10 million people are chronically food insecure. This is because that the distribution of rainfall in Ethiopia is erratic, and a measure is necessary to prolong the service life or the availability of the water. Well, Egypt also says that Nile is the only freshwater source, and the dam is an existential threat. But here I did a little bit of hydrology, which shows that Egypt has indeed more water than Ethiopia. Egypt sits on a Nubian sandstone aquifer, which has a tremendous amount of groundwater. And Egypt has unlimited access to coastal line, despite Ethiopia is, unlike Ethiopia, which is a landlocked country and has no contact with the coastal water. So this narrative of Nile as only its freshwater source is actually unfounded. But we acknowledge that shared responsibility is crucial to develop and projects and to mitigate the consequence of droughts in the region. History has shown us that the countries which have high storage capacity per capita has more resilience to drought management. And Egypt and Sudan has this capacity, but Ethiopia do not have this capacity, does not have the capacity. So Ethiopia has been actually experiencing droughts every 5 to 10 years. And when it comes, it's almost a disaster. So, but once GERD is filled in years of average or above average Nile flows, it's unlikely that the release from Aswan will change. So the new status quo will not affect that much in a year of average or normal river flow in Nile basin. However, whenever a multi-year drought occurs in the region, a basin-wide drought management has to be put in place, which actually has to be shared by all countries. It will not be fair to shoulder all the responsibility to Ethiopia as the source of the most of the water in the Nile basin. So a basin-wide drought management plan has to be envisaged in order to maximize the use of the water and minimize the effect of drought in the region. In summary, GERD project is a development project holding hopes for millions of Ethiopians and to electrify 60 million people, which are not hungry yet. GERD is not a threat to regional peace and security. It is rather a basis for regional cooperation and benefit sharing. Ethiopia has shown its commitment to engage Egypt and Sudan, and by being transparent in execution of the GERD project in an unprecedented manner. I say this because Ethiopia, compared to its experience in the past, has shown a very good transparency on the execution of this project. The project has been accessible to media outlets, and many have reported by going at the project site. And officials from all the countries and concerned parties have been invited to visit the project, and the feedback that the government is getting is very appreciative. On the other hand, political willingness and solidarity from Egypt and Sudan is very little to reach an agreement which is implementable on GERD that serves the interest of the three countries. Ethiopia is demanding nothing more than fairness, and the international community and media should engage constructively to avoid tensions in the fragile region of East Africa that may create economic vulnerability and encourage illegal immigration out of the region. Of course, we are very encouraged by the support or the response that the EU and the UN Security Council responded to the issue following Egypt's attempt to internationalize the GERD project. So it's only cooperation and peaceful coexistence which will resolve the region's problem, not confrontation or misleading the international community. So as Joseph Borrell said here, we must turn this dispute into an opportunity for the whole region. Thank you very much. This is it.
Thank you, Dr. Mugleta. This is a very insightful presentation where you highlighted from the colonial era water sharing treaties and initiatives very clearly, the unfairness, and also details about the GERD, and as well as the development challenges Ethiopians have in terms of providing electricity power and solving the problems of economic problems in Ethiopia. We have also clearly highlighted the GERD's contribution, not only to Ethiopia, to the region, even to the extent of reducing the damage that the flood over Sudan can impact the region, and also great contributions from this dam on providing electricity for the region. And finally, very clearly, the claims by Egypt and the need for a shared responsibility has been presented. And we thank you again for a very good presentation. I think there is a short notice here. I think the ambassador has some urgent engagements, and thank you, Ambassador, for coming. And hopefully we will have many more meetings like this. And we really thank you for your presence in this meeting. Now we go to the second presenter, Dr. Admasu. The floor is
thank you. Would you please give me access to screen sharing?
You have access, Professor.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay? Do you get, can you see that, Mr. Moderator?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, so I will, you have to tolerate my, all right. So now it should be.
Yes.
So is that okay?
Yes.
All right. I think Dr. Mulugeta have gone through what I have been thinking in some cases. And whenever I have some duplicated ideas, I will try to just so that you can only hear it once and listen to other new ones. So first, I think I have to introduce myself. And I have been in water resource engineering field for the last 40 years, 15 years in teaching, including being a dean of Armament Water Technology Institute. That makes us colleagues with Dr. Mulugeta in that case, and 25 years of consultancy service in water resource engineering, and out of which 12 years are international consultancy, mainly in Africa, like Kagera River Basin, within Lake Victoria region, and 4 other international or transboundary rivers within Southern Africa. So in these areas, I've been mainly focusing in teaching as well as in consultancy with multi-purpose reservoirs. So multi-purpose combined with transboundary rivers, I would say that is my territory. I'm also a core group member of the technical aspects for negotiation activities. And I hope if there is a critical question, that may be forwarded in that respect, I can support Lemlem in that territory. Coming to today's presentation here, I'll focus mainly on what can we learn from Norway. It may look like a strange question, but it's very important from my point of view, my experience. We have a lot to learn. So I will mention two areas only in this respect. And next topic will be deforestation and fuel scarcity. And then comes soil erosion in the upper Blue Nile Basin, followed by sedimentation in GERD and downstream reservoirs. Finally, I will talk a little bit about live storage of GERD and downstream reservoirs. When I start my presentation, I will start with what Dr. Mulugeta has already mentioned. Ethiopia's main energy source at present is waste and biomass. It covers 92.4%. And when it comes to hydropower, it's only 1.6%. Then it's important that Ethiopia has to acknowledge that Ethiopia has started the path of shifting its primary hydropower in the hydropower production direction. There are also other sources like many type of sources, solar, geothermal, and so on. But the major potential we have is hydropower. And if we just compare Ethiopia and Norway, specifically in this area, in Norway, 98% of the renewable energy sources. Out of all these renewable energy sources, power takes the lion's share, and even more than the lion's share. It amounts to watt-hour per year. While Norway is a unique position in global perspective, Ethiopia is also in a unique position in African perspective with regard to hydropower potential. Ethiopia is second in African perspectives. The first one is Congo, and Ethiopia comes second. The difference between Norway and Ethiopia is Norway has gone a lot in this direction, while Ethiopia has started its journey in the same path. So that is why I'm saying there is a lot to learn from Norway, because they have been in it and they are in it. Specific figures I can see here. I share those figures. Ethiopia is a very large country compared to Norway. Ethiopia has an area of more than 1 million square kilometers, while
Professor, we seem to have some connection problem, Professor.
Yeah.
You are on and off.
Is there a
Voice is
problem in
breaking up.
voice?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
In that case, I think I recommend to shut down the
videos.
video. Yeah.
Is there a video here? Oh, my
Not
own.
not yours. The
I
panel.
mean, all right. Okay.
Yeah,
So
okay.
let me proceed. When we compare two countries, why I put this table is it's very good for most of our audience here, I presume, are Norwegians, in order to understand our problems and related to their achievements. It will be very clear that we need their support in many directions. So when we see the potential of Ethiopia, the potential here is at least feasible in terms of technical aspects and economic aspects. So that is 162 watt-hour per year. Is a huge amount. And the production we have is about 10% of that, while Norwegians have 129 watt-hours. So you can compare it. Norway has got more than 1,000 storage reservoirs. Ethiopia have only 14. The numbers may not matter in this case because half of the Norwegians' power production is mainly from 30 mega reservoirs. And still the numbers matter because it shows how much emphasis they have given to it. In the case of Norway, all the hydropower is not necessarily from storage reservoirs. Storage reservoirs contribute a lot, but still upstream diversion takes also a significant contribution. This upstream diversion cannot be a significant way of harvesting hydropower. Understanding the hydrology of Ethiopia, we have a strong seasonality, and we receive significant amount of river flows only for 2 or 3 months. So storage is almost a must. A clear picture is what we see down here. Per capita consumption. In the case of Norway, in the case of Ethiopia, is 0.348 kilowatt hour per year, whereas Norway has got 39 kilowatt hour per capita, which means 100 Ethiopians are having access that is equivalent to 1% from Norway. Any Norwegian have access about 113 times that of an average Ethiopian. That is what the implication here is. The total production, Ethiopia has, on the average, on per capita, this is 23.80, and we're not lucky that much. The Norwegians have 23.80 and Ethiopia has got 0.14, which is again 166 Ethiopians have amount of hydropower product energy due to hydropower as 166 Ethiopians have access as that of a single Norwegian. And the reservoirs, still you can see it. The other aspect is, it may be strange, because I said we have a lot to learn from Norway, and I said I will present two cases. One is the hydropower, which I have already presented. The other, very important, is as measured by quality of democracy. Norwegians are successful in many directions, especially ranking #1 for many consecutive years in the world as it comes to quality of democracy. I have also written a book on this in Amharic, and we have also a lot to learn from quality of democracy. When I say quality of democracy or democracy, I don't mean only the political system aspect of it. It also includes sustainable development aspect. So here I have 10 points. If we just put them in two groups, half of it in political systems, half of them in sustainable development. So you can see what the Norwegian democracy is doing. It's not there to serve the first 5 groups. Basically, the first 5 groups are there to serve the second 5 issues. So democracy for the Norwegians is of the people, of course. By the people is okay. Many others are also doing it. But for the people, not many democratic countries can do that. It's only Scandinavian countries in the northern Central Europe, like Holland, Switzerland, Germany, and so on. So in order to have a successful implementation of plans like hydropower expansion, it's not only engineers or lawyers and economists important, it's also the system of the country in building democracy, because that enables participation of citizens. And when citizens work together with the government they establish, then I believe that we can reach to any level we like to. And in that case, we can learn a lot from Norway. The second topic that I am going to talk is about the problem of erosion in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a very rich country, and it used to be covered by forests in old days. Actually, because of energy demand, because people need to have energy for everyday life, that forest cover has severely been damaged. We can see the same Ethiopian map in part, A and B. The difference between A and B is one is older than other. A is older than B, but the time gap between them is only 20 years. You can see the brown sheds expanded in map B compared to A. And you can see the dark greens disappearing in part B compared to A, and so on. The reason is every day, every time many people are cutting trees. Not only trees, all other covers, all sorts of vegetations for different purposes. That is a daily routine for every family. And also, not all students are lucky to have sufficient light to study night times, especially in rural areas. Then comes, as a consequence of deforestation, not only trees, all sorts of vegetations, then comes severe erosion. Here we see gully erosion, the sheet erosions that occurs everywhere in different forms. They're widely occurring all parts of the country, but these are typical. They cut away very fertile soils. You can imagine, for example, here, the second or the third slide, you have here maize farm. All of a sudden there is a cut. The land was not bad, it was good enough to supply sufficient nutrition for this maize, but all of a sudden a part of the land is cut away. So this type of phenomena is widely scattered, it's all over. And finally, if you see the the right side, you see rivers carrying very much concentrated sediment. So these rivers don't stop here. They carry that sediment as far as they can towards a downstream direction. So looking at a general way of evaluating where soil erosion can be serious, here are indicators. This table shows us what can happen from natural forests down to forest plantations. And if that forest plantation is combined with removal of litters or any cover from the ground, you can see right side column. In the natural forest case, it could be only 0.3, but the last, we can see like 48 tons per hectare per year, or 53, and so on. So not only having forest, but the way plants are mixed, integrated to keep the soil intact is what matters a lot. If we see this dark line there, down there is a flow, the blue is rainfall, red is sediment transport. So generally rainfall and sediment transport are correlated. Obviously, runoff is also correlated. But if you look at this very closely, sediment transport is very high at the beginning of rainy season. It's very high compared to what can happen later. towards the end of the rainy season. For the same amount of runoff, if it happens prior to the peak flow season, compared to what can happen after the peak flow season, erosion is serious at the early season because of land is disturbed. You can observe a lot of dusty courses, river courses, as well as farm fields and so on, susceptible to erosion. The moment there is rainfall, easy to be washed away. And
Professor, you have only 3 minutes to wrap up the presentation. So
okay, I will run. As far as you are fair, it's okay for me. Now, another problem here that aggravates the problem is the population pressure we have. We have very young population. For example, under 15 years, we have 43.5% of the population, and so on. It simply means that if you compare the population growth or a population increase with Norway, every 2 years, Ethiopians will have a new population, exactly the same, the entire population of Norway. So you can imagine Norway's population is piled up every 2 years in the case of Ethiopia. So that is a serious one. And this is covered by Dr. Mulugeta. Okay, let me come here. Because of the GERD would have sedimentation rate of 45 million meter cube per year as a maximum, and 70 million meter cube per year as a minimum. On the average, GERD, the sedimentation at GERD will be 27 million meter cube per year. So if GERD, at the end of the filling, retains this much amount of sediment within itself, it simply means that all other reservoirs downstream of sediment, I mean the downstream of GERD, will be relieved from this sediment. Without GERD, the sediment have been there to reduce the lives of those downstream reservoirs. But once GERD is filled, it's there to retain most of the sediment that would have gone downstream. Okay, this is my slide. Upstream of GERD reservoir, there are also many other reservoirs on the main course of Blue Nile. From many of those, the 4 are already being considered as feasible. And the sum of energy that we can have from those sites will be almost equal to the energy that we are producing from GERD. Generally, what I want to say is, as Dr. Mulugeta already mentioned, Ethiopia have a very tremendous potential for hydropower production. So I will appeal for Norwegians or other audiences of this presentation, that hydropower is there to harm nobody, but to benefit everybody. In this particular case, whenever Ethiopia wants to develop itself by producing adequate energy, it's also benefiting other riparian countries. We have a say that is deep-rooted in our culture, not only with the government floating up there, but with the culture. We say, "Yon's lich." This is Amharic word, but it simply means that the political boundary of people may be drawn in a haphazard manner. But if you are in the same basin, sharing the same water, you are like one citizen. There is no Ethiopians, Sudanese, or Egyptians when it comes to with sharing this resource. We are all Yon's Lijoch. We are all citizens of this basin. So that is my message at last. So if the moderator wants me, and if questions specifically are raised in line with the negotiation, I will be around to respond from technical point of view. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. A very good presentation. Very clearly highlighted what we can learn from Norway, and not necessarily in hydropower, even other forms of renewable energy, wind, solar, and so on. And clearly highlighted Ethiopia has just started that journey, and we have a lot to learn from Norway. And also the impact of deforestation or erosion, and deforestation itself causing a lot of damage. And finally, also you clearly highlighted the sedimentation rate of GERD and what it means to the downstream countries. So that has been really well taken. And thank you again, Professor. Now we go to the last presenter, Dr. Emmanuel Junju. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you give me the ability to share my screen?
You have access to share.
Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Yes, just a second. I think I'm sharing the wrong screen, so I have to change. Okay. Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity and for all the nice presentations that have already been made. A lot of the things I'm going to say, some of the things that I had planned to say have probably been already said. Bear with me if there is a little bit of repetition. But first I'll introduce myself. My name is Emmanuel Junju. I come from Uganda, where I actually worked with hydropower and also with water resources in different capacities, both in private sector and in the government sector. And later on, I came to Norway and studied the same degree as Dr. Mulugeta, a master's in hydropower development, and later a PhD in hydropower, rather in water resources, where I looked at the impact of climate change and how we can adapt within East Africa. Ethiopia wasn't included in my studies, but I was focusing mostly on Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, what is traditionally called the East African community. I'm currently working in Trondheim with Sweco, that's a consulting engineering company, among other issues. And I work mostly with the hydrology water resources related to infrastructure, and also hydropower and dams. Dam safety is a big part of what I work with on a daily basis. Just to mention, in the last 1 or 2 years, I have had the opportunity to also work a little bit closely with the Nile Basin Initiative that is based with the headquarters in Entebbe, where they're trying to develop a strategy, or let's say guidelines for dealing with climate change or integrating climate change in development of dams. So I've had a bit of interaction with them and learned a little bit about the history of that organization and what they're trying to do. And so a bit of what I'll share is a bit of what I have also learned from that. I bring a slightly different perspective here because of course, we know we're all following, very interested in what's going on with GERD. And we know that these issues that Ethiopia is going through are not just Ethiopian issues, they're generally Nile issues. And lots of the points that have already been mentioned here are things that we also in the other riparian countries upstream, just like Ethiopia, also have had some issues about. Anyway, without so much ado, I'll try to go directly to my presentation. Just wondering why it's not changing. Okay. Just give me a second. I'm having a bit of a technical problem here.
It's changing now.
It has already changed.
Okay, sorry. All right, yeah. I have 2 screens, so that's the challenge. Yeah, a little bit. I will just revisit a little bit about the Nile Basin because I would like to have the whole context represented once more. Here you see that the Nile Basin is a quite large basin with a total area of almost over 3 million square kilometers. It's 10% of the African continent. And within this area, we have 20% of the African population, which is at least by 2016 data, around 257 million people. But the countries themselves, as per 2016, we noticed that they had almost 500 million people in the riparian countries. And we can see that the population growth in this area has been quite, looking from 1965, you can see the top curve is basically showing the total population in the Nile, in all the 11 Nile Basin countries, including Eritrea, and all the other participant countries. And the dotted line, which is basically the next one, shows the countries that are considered to be in the Victorian Albert Nile countries, and that is Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, and Kenya, as well as the DRC. That shows you the kind of population growth that they're having. And then the next 2 curves that are close to each other show the population in Egypt and in Ethiopia, relatively similar, although as you can see, Ethiopia's population is growing at a faster rate and is right now much higher than the population in Egypt. And I will not go so much into the rest of the curves, but this is just an image to show you about the number of people that basically hope to take benefits from the Nile in the region, in the different countries. And here you can see, well, in terms of what we see in terms of water resources and also in terms of human development. On the left side, you see a map that I have taken from one of the Nile Basin Initiative documents that shows the water towers of the Nile, showing that these are the areas that contribute a lot of water because they generally have less losses in terms of evaporation, but they also have kind of a little bit considerable rainfall compared to all the other areas. And here you see the highland areas in Uganda, both in the eastern and in the western side. And of course, most importantly, like Dr. Mulugeta has already mentioned, the areas in Ethiopia, huge contributions. But then the picture on the right shows you the other side of the story. And that story is basically the Human Development Index, which is a measure of average achievement in key dimensions of human development. And here we're referring to a long and healthy life, being knowledgeable, having a decent standard of living. This is basically just a statistic that is a mean of all these three areas: health, quality of life, and being knowledgeable, basically level of education amongst other things. And you can see that almost all the other East African, rather Nile Basin countries have a low human development, they're in the low human development category, except Egypt, which is considered to be in the medium. And meaning that if you're going to, I mean, we all know about all the development goals of the UN and all that. And if you're going to get all these countries to at least be equal to Egypt, you're going to have to do a lot of development. Of course, one could argue, the social scientists might argue about all the different types of things that people could do in a country, but it's not an argument to say that in order to develop a country, you need to have energy. And energy, and then I have to come to the next point about energy. How does it look today? Generally in the entire Nile Basin. But before I go to energy, I still just mention this graph on the top left, which basically shows you the gross domestic product, which is a normally used economic indicator. And this is a figure from 2011. And I know there's been changes, but it's not, the patterns between the different countries have not changed that much, even if there's a higher growth rate in most of the countries within the Nile Basin area, but the patterns haven't changed much. Anyway, here you show that per capita or per individual that Egypt still has a quite large advantage over all the other countries within the basin. And you see that it's followed maybe by Sudan and Kenya, but generally you can see that there's a large difference between the per capita GDP. And this picture is also sustained when it comes to the percentage of the population with access to electricity in the Nile Basin countries. You see that there's a lot that needs to be done to get the people to a level of development, to a level of access of at least electricity, which actually drives a lot of things in terms of access to modern telecommunication, access to education, being able to actually do your homework at night, which is a basic thing that almost kids, a right kids should have, but not necessarily being able to have that. So electricity is a very big driver of this, and you see the differences in the countries. And then then when it comes to the per capita consumption that has also been mentioned before, you still see that there is still that huge disparity between all the other African countries, all the other Nile Basin countries compared with Egypt. And so it's not something that we can just ignore or something that we can just wish away. It's something that we have to find a solution for. Here I show a figure that shows the state of electricity and development. And in this case, the figure is mostly about hydropower potential, because most of the countries in the East African region, that is Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, and Burundi, in their studies for development of the energy sector, you can see that hydropower is really one of the key sources of energy that they're looking at, because it's one that enables very fast grid connection, not mentioning all the other advantages when it comes to sustainability and when it comes to also impact on the environment, and of course what's available in terms of resources and what people can pay for. Just to go a little bit back in history, in the last years, especially in Uganda, where I come from, we went through a period where we had huge problems with electricity supply. And so we had to go for expensive alternatives for quite some time. And that brought the cost to around maybe 16 to 20 US, US cents per kilowatt hour. And that was not affordable at all. And preceding feasibility studies showed that actually hydropower was still the most feasible or the most affordable alternative when it came to investment, when it came to cost per unit. And the potential is still there, as you can see. you're looking at, for example, if I pick out Uganda and Tanzania, or maybe Uganda, because almost all the capacity for Uganda is on the Nile, because the entire country is in the Nile basin. You see that is 6,950, and that's what I would call technically feasible potential based on feasibility studies, because the studies themselves are not exhaustive, because the studies tend to be very limited based on who is doing it and what the objective is. But anyway, that is what you'll find in the International Journal of Hydropower Dams, that is 6,950 by 2014. And look at how much has been developed, only 695. And you've already seen the picture where it comes to, unfortunately I don't have a figure for Egypt here, but it's an Ethiopia, but it shows you clearly that there's a huge potential for hydropower development to meet some of the socio-economic needs that I have highlighted earlier. And the demand is also projected to grow astronomically. The populations are still growing astronomically, and as the economy improves, and the demand is also going up. But also there's what we call captive demand, the demand we're not able to actually meet today because of the lack of transmission, because of the lack of systems to actually turn the water resources into energy. So this is something that everybody thinking about how to share the resources in the water in the Nile River has to have at the back of their mind. It's not just about water, it's also about livelihoods of people who have already been sacrificing a lot. And as per today, we have lots of challenges. We have within the existing frameworks that have been there historically, for example, operation of our hydropower projects on the Nile, like the Owen Falls and several others, has historically been subject to lots of constraints from, of course, downstream countries, especially Egypt. And the construction of new hydropower projects hasn't always been without problems. I think I remember when I worked on my first job in Uganda, it was building an extension to the hydropower hydroelectric station, the Owen Falls Dam. Now we're building an extension of around 200 megawatts, and we had to have Egyptian observers even then looking at it, and that was in 1997, before the current framework of the NBI was actually in place. So we still had to go by the old colonial agreements. We always talk about irrigation, and it's very difficult to start new and large irrigation projects, despite the fact that many of these countries face challenges with malnutrition and others, and that we actually have quite long, some dry seasons between the wet seasons, and the only way you're going to improve output in some areas is to do irrigation. And actually, irrigation upstream in these countries might actually bring more benefits, because when you consider that the rate of evaporation is much lower than maybe further downstream, that probably if we find ways in which we can share benefits and do the farming where it actually leads to less losses for water, that might actually be an advantage. But of course, that's just something for discussion. I talked earlier about climate change adaptation. We see that climate change is a real issue, especially in this region. And one of the things that's coming out lately is that we might have, for example, sometimes an increase in rainfall, especially within the East African area, within our area. And but then also the droughts might become a bit extreme, meaning that at some point we have to be considering more storage projects to be able to cope or to adapt. And this is going to be a conflict for the future, but it also could offer lots of opportunities. So these are things that we have to think about. We also have, of course, a problem of financing and conditions of financing. Historically, of course, most of the projects that we have done within East Africa, have been probably not been able to be financed 100% by the governments. We needed to get lots of financing from the World Bank, from other organizations. And then through the lobbying of other countries, we probably were also limited in how to actually develop the projects to meet our own needs. So this is one issue that I think Ethiopia probably has solved in one way, and which probably also other countries are looking forward to doing. But I think it would be nice if international players who are traditionally financing these projects can also start to understand things from our perspectives. Anyway, I wanted to talk about also how we as the states or the nations in the, especially what we call the Nile Equatorial region, have been, what kind of things we've been involved with together with our partners in the region to make sure that developing of projects and maybe sharing water resources on the Nile can become more equitable. I know that Dr. Mulugeta has already given you the historical context of operation on the Nile, so I'm not going to dwell so much on that, but I will probably start a little bit from the 1960s to 1990s, where of course most of the countries became independent and wanted to do to develop their resources, and they were increasingly frustrated, especially by the downstream countries, and there's no secret about this. Mostly is from Egypt and at that time Sudan. So anyway, in the beginning, in around the late 1990s, there was a need, or there was observed a need to actually have some kind of a framework in which to discuss these issues and find a way to make it easier for the countries to work together on the Nile. And that's how the Nile Basin Initiative was formed. Before that, as we know, there was a lack of confidence and trust to engage in cooperative transboundary projects and programs. There was no basin-wide or Nile basin-wide mechanism to communicate and exchange information. There was no institutional foundation for joint management of the common water resources. There was almost very low level stakeholder involvement in the process for the entire basin. And then we had these countries like Egypt and Sudan who felt that they had historical water rights that were enshrined in colonial era agreements that most countries upstream were no longer willing to deal with. Anyway, despite all the hurdles, in this 10-member intergovernmental partnership, the NBI was formed, with including Eritrea, of course, as an observer. It was inaugurated, as earlier mentioned, in 1999 in Tanzania, and it was basically seen as just a transitional mechanism until the Nile Basin Commission is established under the cooperative framework agreement, which is something that was supposed to be negotiated over time. And the NBI exists, and at least for the Nile equatorial countries and Ethiopia, we have regional offices. In Ethiopia, I think it's called ENTRO, and for the NELSAP, we have the NELSAP units, and then we have the main secretariat, which is based in Entebbe in Uganda, that coordinates all this work. The council, I think many of you probably know already about it. It's led by a council of ministers responsible for water in the different countries. And also that council is advised by the Nile Technical Advisory Committee that is high-level technocrats in the different countries. Of course, as you know, the different countries sometimes have a lot of needs and different objectives, and getting things done in such a huge organization can be quite complicated. But anyway, this was like the first attempt to try and come up with some mechanism until we have a clear cooperative framework agreement. And the idea was that this cooperative framework agreement would basically has already been put in place and has been signed by some countries, but it has yet to be ratified by many countries, though most countries, I think, have signed, some haven't, and I'll just go through this a little bit. What is this cooperative framework agreement that was supposed, and what was it supposed to do? This was supposed to lay out the principles, or it laid out the principles, rights, and obligations for cooperative management and development of the Nile Basin water resources. It was supposed to have a framework to promote integrated management, sustainable development, and harmonious utilization of water resources, as well as think of things of conservation and sustainability for the protection of the water resources for future generations. And as I mentioned earlier, the NBI, the Nile Basin, was supposed to be more of a transitional arrangement. And at the conclusion of this CFA, which is not fully concluded yet, a Nile River Basin Commission was supposed to be put in place. And since the CFA is supposed to be ratified by all the countries, then this would have made this NRBC some kind of a legal organization with the ability to actually advise and decide on issues. I think the structure would have been slightly similar in terms of how it would be managed, the NBI, with the Council of Ministers and technical advisory committees and all that. But because of the ratification and because of an agreement on certain key principles, it would have had a little bit more power in terms of deciding on things than the current NBI, which is basically limited to developing a few small projects and then between countries, and well, not small projects, a few projects between countries, and then maybe just facilitating the process of developing the CFA. Anyway, the CFA, the treaty, has several articles, and the scope is in Article 1 and 2, and this treaty at least is available. If you can go to the NBA webpage, you can find a PDF that you can look at, and actually you can also see the signatures of the countries that have signed so far and the blank spaces of those countries that haven't signed it yet. But the remainder part of the text is divided into 6 parts after defining all these basic issues of water resources in the Articles 1 and 2. And here you talk about, we have general principles, rights and obligations, institutional structure, all that is defined within this CFA. And here, with respect to the principles—
You have 2 minutes, Dr. Emmanuel.
Yeah, so
okay.
The principles of international water law are clearly defined there. How it talks about the rights and obligations of the different state parties. You can look at the slides later if I'll share them. I don't have to go so much in details. And it talks about how the Nile River Basin Commission would work. It also provides for the establishment of subsidiary institutions to help in resolving future issues. It also talks about how the disputes that might arise from implementation might be resolved. And as far as the timeline is concerned, as I've already mentioned a lot of these issues, I will not go back to what has happened since 1997 when the first negotiations were in place. But as per 2010, 7 countries agreed to open the CFA text and they signed, except Egypt and Sudan. Later on, you had 4 countries, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Tanzania and Uganda signing, and Kenya signed in 2010. Burundi also signed in 2011. Ethiopia ratified this CFA in 2013, and Rwanda in 2013, and Tanzania, and that's the last data that you have on this. However, what has happened now, the developments, is that those countries that seem to have an agreement, and that's generally almost all the upper riparian countries except Sudan and Egypt, they have continued with their projects on the Nile, notwithstanding the impasse over the CFA and the erosion of the NBI. The GRDE has proved a major challenge and a source of bitter dispute between Ethiopia, as we've had, and Egypt and Sudan. However, by December 2013, I think Sudan broke ranks with Egypt and declared its full support. I hope that is correct. That's what the information I have. But it looks like, but then I've heard also of something that I have not really gone through in detail, the DOP, where Egypt and Sudan in effect seem to have an agreement on certain issues, which in a way do not contradict so much of the CFA, even if they have not come to actually sign and eventually ratify the CFA. And so this is something that maybe would be interesting to hear from the legal minds that I had mentioned about what they feel about this issue and what might go back. But anyway, to conclude generally, the logical thing is that Egypt and Sudan should probably start to think about dropping their demand for recognition of existing users and rights as a part of water security, paragraph of the CFA, because that was the contentious paragraph. I think it was in a section, I think 1.4 or something like that. I don't remember that they had put there as a point of negotiation for them to sign. Because there is this whole belief that the CFA already includes the same provisions of the United Nations Water Coast Convention on equitable and reasonable utilization. So therefore, this obligation should not cause any significant harm. The colonial treaties are no longer on the table, since the 2 countries in principle have accepted the equality of all the riparians, even if on individual projects, you can see that we still have lots of issues that keep on going on. And anyway, finally, it's the fact that if the commission is finally put in place and everybody signs, there will be still mechanisms to handle these issues on a project by project basis. So this is the logical thing should be that this country should try and join all the others. Thank you for listening. I hope I managed to use the time as effectively as I can. I'm sorry, I went a little bit over. And I hope that these issues can be resolved and that these countries can at some point come together to work and understand each other's needs, especially the need for human development in the countries that really, really need it, so that we can all support each other. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel. Very clear message. You have highlighted the water resources in the region and the human development, even in terms of the development index. Clearly, the electricity and development in the region, specifically on the right, to access electricity for these regions. And I've also clearly cited the constraints and challenges on the operation of the hydroelectric power stations, irrigation projects, and drought and other financing issues. And we have also learned a lot about the Nile Basin Initiative from its formation and the cooperative framework agreement and its progress so far. And finally, the logical steps that these countries has to take in order to peacefully resolve some of the problems we have now, and also for equitable use of the water. And we thank you so much, Dr. Emmanuel, for that. But now, before we go for questions and comments, I would like also to give a 2-minute talk by our only guest from Ethiopia, Lemlem Fsa, who is the Director General of International Legal Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So, Lemlem.
Thank you, Dr. Tafari. Good afternoon, or a very late good morning for everyone. And I just wanted to say very few words with regard to the workshop, as well as the ongoing negotiation on the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam between our three countries, Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. First, thank you so much for really having the interest and also trying to spread the word about Ethiopia's legitimate rights to use the resource of the Nile River, as well as the need to establish one effective regional mechanism when it comes to the relationship between these 11 African countries. Everybody always misses the point that the Nile is a river that crosses 11 African countries and is not limited only to Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. In any case, I really appreciate the effort, and it's always a pleasure to appear in such forums and impart information as to the existing situation with regard to the negotiation. As you very well know, the GERD negotiation concerns the guidelines on the first filling and annual operation of the dam. It's being held under the framework of the Declaration of Principles, which Dr. Emmanuel has mentioned, which was signed in 2015 between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. It's just a project-focused document which outlines the principles which shall really be respected by the countries in their engagement with regard to the GERD instead of the Nile, because we don't have a basin-wide instrument that regulates our relationship, because the cooperative framework agreement on the Nile, which was adopted in 2010, is only ratified by 4 countries. I would add Uganda to Dr. Emmanuel's list, because Uganda has ratified the CFA last year in 2019, and they deposited the instrument of ratification at the African Union Commission as provided under the convention. So we are now remaining with 2 more ratifications only to have an effective regional mechanism that can bring all the countries together, and also, put in place a legal and institutional mechanism for our usage, as well as for our cooperation in relation to the Nile. After saying this, I will really leave my participation to the responses I will give for the questions. But again, I really would like to reiterate my appreciation for the organizers for putting this forum together. Thank you.
Thank you, Lemlem. Thank you all. Now is time for questions and comments. So like we said earlier, you can raise your hands or send your questions or comments on text on the chat area.
Yeah. Dr. Tafari, there are two hands raised. That's from Dr. Leo and Sheba Africa. So let's give chance for them to talk. Dr. Leo.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank the organizers of this webinar. Really, it's very timely and very relevant. And I will go directly to my questions. Question, in fact, I would on the threat posed by water weeds that's worrying many of us these days on natural lakes like Lake Tana and Victoria, and the implications and impacts of hydroelectric power plants and man-made lakes like that of GERD. Would they help to mitigate or the problem, or is there any potential risk of exacerbating the problem? Many of us who are not experts within this field are very nervous right now, and that would help us understand if we hear your views on the matter. Thank you.
Okay, Sheba Africa, you can present your question. Hello, Sheba Africa. We cannot hear you.
Okay, maybe let's go to Asmamau. I see a hand in Asmamau there.
Yeah.
Are you listening me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the three presenters. Very nice presentation. And my question is for Dr. Emmanuel. The question is that you have said, or you have presented about the international water law principles. And it's about, for example, the first principle is about the equitable and reasonable share of water. And we have heard about this from the Egyptians many times, even recently in the United Nations Security Council. They have presented that they need the equitable and reasonable share of water. Do you think that they really understand what does it mean?
Okay.
Yeah, there is a written question. Actually, it can be answered together from Professor Mamo. Lake Tana is suffering from inbound aram. Any comments? Please ask the presenter.
Okay, let's, there are 4 questions. I don't know, the last one may not be directly related to this talk, but let's start from the first one. I think you have taken note, Mulgeta or Dr. Professor Armasu, on the first question by Leo.
Well, yeah, regarding the weeds, especially on Lake Tana, I have no information. I don't mean general information, but specifically knowledge-based information. I don't have that. But this problem also occurs on Lake Victoria. So maybe Dr. Manuel can help on me in that if he has any.
Yeah, the thing is, I've been following a little bit from the background what's been happening in Lake Victoria. First, in the 90s, I think we had the water hyacinth problem. And there was, water hyacinth was more of an imported weed that kind of was brought into the country by people who were interested in it as a flower. And then later on it was, I think, something like that. And then it just suddenly found its way into the lake and was blocking up large parts of the lake. At that time, there was lots of issues to do with how to remove it. And they considered biological methods, they considered technical methods, I think, manual methods. And I think the story is that there's been quite some progress in dealing with that. But lately, what we are having now is what we call floating islands that are kind of, you have this, because upstream of Lake Victoria, you have these huge swamps. And lots of people, lots of pressure from farming and other activities have meant that people are doing a lot of farming and destroying lots of wetlands. And so you have lots of islands that have been flowing into the lake. And as per even last year or even during this year, they've had threats at the lake, at the Owen Falls Dam, where you had a huge island floating of vegetation and all that. Interestingly, it was also including some crops that people had planted that was floating towards the dam. What they had to do was to open the spillway fully. Of course, luckily, most of the transport was happening at a time when you had heavy rains and lots of water. So they managed to steer it away from the dam using by opening the spillways, but there's still always some mechanical work that's being done to reduce that. I think that the people in Uganda, the environmental agencies and the hydropower people would probably have a much better answer than I have now. And online, there's also lots of information about what they're doing. I could share maybe in a private email if you some information about how they're handling the issue of the water weeds and these floating islands in Lake Victoria. But I can't share that now, but I'll be very happy to send that to a moderator in case you want to know more about what's happening in Uganda.
Okay. Could you also answer, there is a question on equitable and reasonable use of water by claim by Egypt,
Yes.
and what does that mean?
Yes, from my own presentation, as you can see, a lot of the times I define equity in terms of the needs to get people's livelihood to a certain level. I do not know how the Egyptians define it. Maybe they're defining it based on what they already have. It's something I'm not so conversant with, or if I'm conversant with, I'm just saying it diplomatically. That my feeling would be that equity should be related to human development needs, because we are all sharing this resource, and some other people have sacrificed so much for so many years so that other people can have a certain standard of living. And I think it's important for people to sometimes understand their privilege. And unfortunately, the discussion of privilege is very difficult, because once you're used to a privilege, sometimes it's difficult to get rid of this privilege. So you might be trying to find another privilege. But I'm a hydrologist, and I don't want to go so much into social science and all these issues of human behavior and all that. But I feel like basically from a basic point, without even thinking about all the politics involved, it's really about raising people to a standard that is equal. And for the case of the Nile, it means being able to provide energy, to provide electricity, to provide a good way to live. As to whether those people understand it or how they understand it, that is a big topic for discussion. I think that I myself alone cannot necessarily conclude right now.
Great, thank you. Dr. Mulgeta, on the first question.
I think I don't have much comment on the this weed, which is infesting Lake Tana, and I think it's also the same in Lake Victoria. So I find very little study, and I think this is something that we could also work. Our group and others interested could join us, and I think we may find some expert on this and arrange some such kind of a webinar in the future. But for the time being, I think I don't have any suggestion for. I think it's beyond my competence, and I think I have not been following it so much.
Great. We have another questions. No, so let's do like about
I
4
comment
questions.
on the equitable water use very briefly.
Okay.
Okay. Equitable water use or equitable and reasonable water use, you can only understand it if you keep in mind a hypothetical river basin whereby people living in there from extreme upstream to the extreme down in, if you want to serve those people in a reasonable way, then you have come to a solution what we mean by equitable and reasonable use. Otherwise, don't go within the text, even conventions that will directly answer such a question. Haven't come to that level again. But when I conclude what it does mean, it simply means that we have to put something in our mind from downstream in to the upstream in, whoever is living with the basin to be considered as a citizen in that hypothetical geographical basin. That's all what I can say.
Great.
Maybe one small comment. The reasonableness, of course, sometimes brings into issues like environment, sustainability. That's I know the question was mostly on the equitable, but reasonableness is, I think, also goes a little bit more about how sustainable a certain water use is in terms of the environment and basin interest for the future.
Okay, thanks. So I think Brooke, your mic is working now. So we give Brooke Tadessa and I don't know, 86732 code, and then Dr. Fantau and Dr. Grom. So 4 of you, and there is a lot of questions on the chat. I will address that questions as well. So let's go to the 4 questions first.
Brooke, you can speak now.
Okay, I think Brooke's mic is not working again. There is a question in chat. I'll read one from Antenna. It says, we learn from various sources that Egypt has been experimenting a lavish development project with the Nile River, diverting part of the river into part of the Sahara Desert, building a system of canals of about 240 kilometers. This is the Toshoka project. How was this project communicated to the other riparian countries? If it was, how was this responded to? What is the effect of this project on the sharing of the water on Nile River? So 3 of you can comment on this. One question, and I think now, Brooke, your mic is working, I think.
No, I gave access to 863. He can talk now.
Please.
It must be me.
Yeah, 867, yes.
Should I speak now or should I wait for
Yes,
Brooke?
yes.
Please.
May I speak? Okay. Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to the panelists who presented. Very good explanation about the dam. I mean, I could follow. I mean, these are professors talking, yeah? and I could follow what they are saying. I thought that was very nice of them to use a language also that not professor can understand. So I have two questions. I think the first one should go to Wazir Lemlem, because the first thing that caught my attention was Egypt was very sure, or Egypt meant that she had like 100% right to the Nile, the Blue Nile, even though the Nile is within the area of Ethiopia. Where did this? I know it has been resolved, but it is the problem that started things, as far as I understand. And where did this idea come from? I mean, who gave Egypt this idea that the rights of the Blue Nile was Egypt's and that Ethiopia's rights were not important? Or this, what is the I mean, where did it come from? That's one question I have. The other question is to the professor, who, I don't know, maybe you live in Norway, but you were talking a lot about Norway, a good cooperation between Norway and Ethiopia. I appreciate that. It was very sad to understand that we are only starting with this thing, and also Norway is very much like 1,000 years ahead of us. It was very sad to think, oh my God, how are we going to reach there? But we are not going to try to reach, but it is good that we are trying to make good connections with Norway because they have the technology to help with this. Also, we come faster forward to the completion, like maybe it will take us 10 years, but maybe less than 10 years will take us, with all the good benefits that the project of the GERD brings. But you have to also understand, Professor, that Norway does not also has this problem with the the ground opening and making a lot of damage because of especially in the north, because of the winter, the long winter, and the storms, and the wind. They have that kind of technology also, to avoid this dust, the sediment going downstream and getting lost. Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
What? You are stopping me now?
I think we have to limit the time for the questions about
the question. That's
okay.
why I am going to come to the question. I'm not preaching. I'm sorry. So the question I have is, the first one is, of course, to Wazir Lamlam. Where did it come from? To Professor, I am saying, will they also help with this sediment going away from the farmers, or from wherever it is getting eroded? Yeah. Will they help with that? Do you think it is okay? And this saying with the Johan Zelig, is that also a saying known in Egypt? Will they be helping? Will they need to understand that to behave a little better while this GERD is being built? And also, there was a saying that there are 11 countries that the Nile crosses. So would the Johan Zelig also apply to all the 11 countries? Thank you. I am sorry I took so long time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Fanta, I think.
Okay, before that, I think let's try to limit the minutes, like try to address the question in possible 1-2 minutes, please. And because we are also running out of time. So please go ahead with the question.
Dr. Fanta, you have access now. Okay, Dr. Groom.
Okay. All are muted, I think.
ማይካቸው እየሰራ አይደለም።
Yes. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to say thank you for all presenters. My name is Dr. Fanta from Ethiopian Institute of Agriculture Research. My question is related directly to the Professor Admasu. On your presentation, you have mentioned that the learning from Norway, particularly we learning from Norway, you mentioned 98% of the renewable energies they used. In addition to this, you see, what sort of information do you have on the potential of renewable energy resources for our country? And also, what sort of policy briefs do you have? Because we are speaking about hydropower, we have also another alternative to make use of this renewable energy. So what sort of the potential and the policy briefs you have in order to use another options in addition to the hydropower to use renewable energy resources for our country? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Groom. I think let's go to the answers before we...
Dr. Groom didn't talk. Let him talk now, and they'll answer them.
Okay.
It was Dr. Fanta who talked now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My question, thank you for the presentation. My question is about public diplomacy. So this goes to Lemlem, to Ethiopia in this case. I appreciate the government's efforts to make the strong diplomatic negotiation regarding to the issues linked to the GERD. But I still feel that public diplomacy, especially that deals with non-state actors, to achieve this successful strategy with GERD, it seems that the government is probably failing to make it this public diplomacy a matter for the ordinary citizens. Even to arrange forums like this one has been challenging because we do not have access to right channels to individuals who are responsible at the government level. Unless somebody knows someone at the ministry of this and that. So maybe my question is more of a suggestion that the government should have a centralized website or something that can be easily accessible for diaspora who is actively engaged to protect the interest of Ethiopia. So is there anything you are going to do in order to make sure that public diplomacy, even for the diaspora and others, are easily accessible information that we need and responsible persons we can connect without having any difficulties or using personal networks? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Groom. Maybe we do like this. There are two questions raised to Lemlem, one on the public diplomacy and another question related to who gave the right to Egypt to monopoly and other later questions. So we proceed with Lemlem, and then there is a question on the potential for renewable energy and policy briefs to Professor Admasu. So you continue after Lemlem, and finally on the issue of Toshika project, Dr. Mulgeta and Dr. Emmanuel can answer on that. So
sorry, Dr. Mulgeta, Lemlem can also answer. There is a question from Lemma Desta on the chat, which says, can you comment on the status of the tripartite agreement of 2015?
Thank you, Dr. Shaka.
Thank you, Dr. Tafari. I really appreciate the questions, and I will start from the third one, which I have also read on the chat box with regard to the status of the Declaration of Principles on the GERD that was signed in 2015. As you know, it's a project-specific document that outlines the principles which we were supposed to follow in order to come up with an agreement on the guidelines and rules for the first filling and annual operation of the GERD. It's an instrument with 10 articles that outlines the principles of water law that Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan agreed to follow, including the equitable and reasonable utilization of the resource, the obligation not to cause significant harm, and the duty to cooperate when it comes to the transboundary impacts of the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. On this basis, we have also agreed to conduct a study, an environmental and social impact assessment study, a trilateral endeavor that was supposed to review the design and study documents by Ethiopia and also outline the impacts and identify the mitigating measures that the countries had to undertake with regard to the implementation of the project in the coming years. We unfortunately were not able to finalize the study due to our disagreement on the baseline, which was supposed to guide the determination of what is significant harm, the determination of what is equitable and reasonable utilization. For Egypt and Sudan, as you very well know, the baseline has to be the existing use, which is established by the 1959 treaty, which provided Egypt and Sudan 100% share over the Nile and did not really consider the interest of Ethiopia over the resource. After disagreeing on the baseline for conducting the study, we proceeded to establish a tripartite national and scientific and research group, which conducted different considerations and scenarios with regard to the filling and operation of the GERD. On that basis, we are now negotiating to determine the particular rules when it comes to filling and operation, and also the drought management measures that the three countries have to take, and also the filling schedule, the duration of the filling, and other detailed aspects of the filling and operation of the GERD, which really is a major subject matter that should really be given its own time and also presentation. But currently we are negotiating under the auspice of the Declaration of Principles signed in 2015. What is its status? Well, it's a legal instrument that is signed between the three countries, but its scope is only the GERD. Its scope is not the Nile. It doesn't determine Ethiopia's or Egypt's or Sudan's equitable share over the Nile resource, which really has to involve, which is a process that has to involve all the 11 riparian countries. But still, under the Declaration of Principles, the tripartite negotiation had continued, and it is still underway under the framework of the African Union to find a solution for most of the outstanding matters in relation to the filling and operation of the GERD. That is my response, my very brief response for the third question. For the first question, where does Egypt's entitlement come from? Maybe I would agree with Dr. Emmanuel. It's a privilege. It's a use that has been established since the beginning of time. They have infrastructures that were built in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. I will comment on the Toshka Canal later, but Egypt, as you very well know, under its constitution, mandates the government to safeguard the historic right of Egypt over the Nile resource. Historic right is another name for the 1959 agreement, which allocated 55.5 billion meter cubic water of the Nile to Egypt. So the entitlement doesn't really come from this arrogance that they own the Nile basin countries, but it really is they are in a very difficult position to let go of the entitlements that they are used to since the beginning of their history. So the existing use, which is consolidated by the colonial-based treaties, is really the foundation for the self-entitlement Egypt is invoking. After saying this, I would really like to comment on a question that was raised with regard to the Toshka Canal. As you probably have heard about Ethiopia's opposition against the projects in Egypt that are built on the Nile River. We have filed our opposition in 1956 ahead of the signature of the 1959 agreement. We have filed our opposition in 1957 immediately before the conclusion of the negotiation over the 1959 agreement. We have filed our opposition in 1997 when Egypt was embarking on the construction of the Toshka Canal. The canals, as you very well know, take the waters of the Nile out of the river basin and establishes another existing use, which Egypt will in the future use to defy our right. And Ethiopia stated that the acts of Egypt are unilateral and significant harm doesn't necessarily come from upstream to downstream. Significant harm also travels from downstream to upstream. The existing use established, by these projects, including the Toshka Canal, are the ones that are being invoked against Ethiopia to foreclose its development efforts.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we heard you.
All right, good. So the measures that are taken with regard to the projects in Egypt by Ethiopia, at least, are reservations or exclusions of or protests, objections that the projects are unilateral and they cannot in the future be invoked to foreclose Ethiopia's right to utilize the Nile River. So the same as we were willing to cooperate, we were also in a position to register our objections when it comes to the unilateral acts of Egypt in building projects over the Nile. As to the public diplomacy effort, I could understand it could be challenging, but I would really advise the person who raised the questions to really use the instruments that are in place. Mr. Lamesa's office, our embassies are willing really to put in touch interested parties with the relevant institutions in Addis Ababa, the Ministry of Water, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have, this is my 16th webinar on the GERD to participate in, and all our missions in different parts of the world, except probably in Latin America, have organized the same kind of webinar, and the diaspora and other interested Ethiopians and also other nationals are being involved in the discourse, because it's very important. Every Ethiopian should defend the project. It's our major footprint on the Nile River, and not only Ethiopians but also other Nile Basin nationals would really do justice to the matter if they get information and also get involved in spreading the word as to the unjust status quo in the Nile River Basin, and also the measures that has to be taken by everyone to correct it for once and for all. In addition to that, I will also would direct the person who raised the question to the web pages of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to the Twitter pages of the spokesperson's office, to the Twitter page of MAF itself, and also the Facebook pages of the institutions, in order to get in touch and also get the right information about the issue. But I really, truly appreciate the question, and we would be more than happy to assist any kind of initiative with regard to, creating awareness on matters of the Nile and also the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor. On that, on the public diplomacy issue.
Okay, please.
Yes, as the closest institution to the Nordic countries, we have been working with professionals in the Nordic countries, including this one today, who have organized this event. And we have also before organized a webinar for professionals, from Finland, from Norway, from Denmark, and Sweden as well. So we are currently engaging all interested individuals, communities, religious institutions, and all kinds of civic society. So as Lamlam has already said, at the country level, at the national level, it is very open for everyone, for any citizen to get information about the GERD from those institutions she mentioned, but with particular reference to this region of Nordic, the embassy is very open to all kinds of cooperations. We have been working all those stakeholders have already said, and we're also again open for any kinds of engagements. We will try to organize such webinars in collaboration with these kinds of institutions, and also not only public diplomacy. We will also in the future, planning to have a fundraising programs. So we appeal to our community and our professionals living in this region to help us in that regard. So we're very open to such kind of engagement with our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Atul Misa. There is a question directed to Professor Admasu on the issue of the potential for renewable energy and policy briefs, and a couple of questions also. But let me add one more question to you, Professor. It is on the chat, and then you can answer. This is from Dr. Leo on the issue on the importance of democracy to realize huge national projects like GERD as a prerequisite. Should it be adjusted like projects like this require functioning democracies or strong or stable government? We all know that democracy is a work in progress, and African countries have a long way to go. So you could also comment on that, and you have about 3 questions directly to you.
Yeah, so I can give first lady, I don't know the number, 867. So I received one question on sediment, whether Norwegians can help us in that direction. It's an interesting question for me because 33 years ago, I've been a student at Royal Institute of Technology. Then we had a chance to travel to Trondheim, educational trip as a Norwegian Science and Technology University. On the way to that, I have visited many hydropower stations, dams and reservoirs. But something that I learned is they have no problem of sedimentation at all. All the seasons, they have clear and clean water flowing through the rivers. And all reservoirs are filled with sediment-free waters. It does not mean that sedimentation cannot be a problem, but if it is, it could be only at selected hotspots, not widespread problem. So the sedimentation problem has to be dealt with us. It has lived with us. We know how much damage it can create. The whole thing is what I have mentioned earlier in the package of democracy. When people participate in solving their problems, they can win it. That is what has happened in the process of building GERD. That is the dam built by people, maybe the first in history of the world. The government has tried its best, but there is also a significant contribution that democracy would like us to do. And hereafter, we have to think of other problems other than GERD. Also, people to get involved in every aspect of our development, our way of life. And that is what I am calling democracy. So in this particular case, for the project GERD, I have no doubt that it has been built in the way that democratic countries can get from their democratic way of doing things. So I think I can answer, I have answered that also for Leo. Regarding alternative energy sources, especially renewable energy sources. As you know, Ministry of Water, Energy, and Irrigation, as the name implies, it has three sectors within itself. Within energy, at the moment, high emphasis is given for hydropower because it is cheaper to do it, and there is also reasonable knowledge and institutions already available to do whatever we can do compared to other type of sources. Otherwise, there is a clear policy gradually other renewable sources like solar, like also safe, clean geothermal energy and wind. So all possible types of renewable energy sources have started giving attention, and that is clearly stated in the policy, also in the institutional setups, and so on. So it won't be far that we'll see also this type of renewable energy sources will be in place. They are not forgotten, at least as far as I know.
Thank you. I can just add a few points on this because there is a work we have done also on understanding the potential of renewable energy, particularly solar and wind energy, with a project with the World Bank. And now also a new paper released for the whole of East Africa, and I can share with you on to look into the potential of solar and renewable solar and wind energy specifically on our region.
Okay.
I think
I have one question that is left and the other one is your village workers for all. If we are talking about the Nile Basin, there are 11 countries. If we are talking the Blue Nile, there are 3 countries. So it depends on the type of basin we are talking, but the principle is the same.
Okay. So let's go to, I think we are running out of time now. We were supposed to finish almost more than 30 minutes ago. And I see some people are already leaving. So let's give a final round of questions for 3, I see so many hands, 4 people, and we have to make it really quick, okay?
Yeah.
So that's the last one we will have. 4 questions, please, Dr. Shagao.
Yeah, I think it will be based on who raised hands first. So there was AFCE waiting for long. So please, and also the other one is Solomon and Antana. And I can give the 4th opportunity to Desalegn, yes.
Okay. This is the final one. We will have many more meetings in the future. So let's
also asked if there is a possibility to ask questions. So if we have time, he can also ask. But let's start from AFCE. So you have access now.
I think the microphone is muted. So if you unmute, FSC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it okay now?
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this webinar and also the presenters. Did you hear me?
Yes.
Oh. Yeah. In fact, my question goes to the to the three presenters, and at the same time also to Wezaro Lamlam, and especially my reference to Dr. Mulugeta, in fact. As you can see from the hydrologic system of the Nile system, you know, the rainfall comes high in the upstream reaches of the Nile system. And that's why more water is produced from the upstream reaches, while the downstream reaches are only the users of the water source that we have in the Nile system. And my question is, if we can work on raising the political borders of the riparian countries and consider the Nile Basin as one system, as a basin, and think of effective water management system, implementation of effective water management systems like regulation work in the upstream reach and development in the upstream reach, so that we can enhance the inflow that's coming to the downstream reach, and what kind of measures that we can take as an expert, and what kind of level of raising the confidence level of the riparian states, so that they can see the basin as a unit and implement effective water management systems in the system, so that we can have more benefit from the system.
Thank you. Next.
Next, Dr. Solomon. Yes.
First, I just want to say thank you for everyone who has participated in arranging this interesting webinar. My question is from education perspective. How can we approach the Nile narrative from African perspective? By that, I mean, we have always followed the Western schooling system, the Western terms, or the colonial terms, where even though Ethiopia, for example, is not colonized, but our school system is a colonized system. So how can we approach this Nile narrative from African perspective? For example, I heard the word Yewanzelig, even though it's not known by other Africans probably. What does it mean by this, and how can we communicate these terms to others? If there are other African narratives related to this Nile basin, for example, in Ethiopia, we call the river Abai. Nobody knows it, only us. So how can we build a narrative from African perspective? Because that narrative is a foundation for principles, for agreements, for regulations, and so on. We should really focus on educating the future generation, and also communicating this parallel narrative by deconstructing the Western colonial. And my question is for everybody participant, especially the main speakers, three of them, and Lamlam, Wezaro Lamlam. How can we really change the Western narrative of the Nile River, and at the same time also, how can we, who is responsible actually for this? If there's such team so far, who is working on such narrative? If we are not started, if somebody hasn't started it, it has to be started. Who can be responsible for this? If there are other such initiatives, can we know? Because we can use that and we can communicate for the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Antene?
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. I would also like to use this opportunity to thank the presenters for delivering a well-focused and well-articulated presentation. and all the panelists for answering and clearing out questions and confusions. My question is just a short follow-up to Wazir Lamlam. This is regarding equitable sharing of the water from the River Nile. It was also previously asked by Dr. Asmama, but from the point of view of Egypt, it would have been nice to learn about what it means for all parties when seen from the legal framework, from the legal point of view. It would have been nice if Wazir Lamlam could enlighten us how the term has been defined in the 2015 Declaration of Principles.
Thank you.
That was my question, because if the communication is not mutual and words are there, but they don't carry the same meaning for all parties that are involved in such discussions, agreements, then they don't mean anything actually.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then
anything. Yeah, thank you.
And Dr. Desalegn and Iheno. These are the last, actually, the two last questions.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for organizing such a panel, and I thank all the presenters for the nice presentation. My question is directly to Professor Adamasu in relation with this sedimentation. I don't know if I missed that part from your presentation, but how the sedimentation can potentially threaten the longevity of the dam itself. That's my first question. The second question is in relation with this. In order to mitigate sedimentation, is there a strict land use, land cover plan within the catchment area? If there is no, can we really manage to organize a kind of think tank group who can work on a project which is mainly focusing on mapping the land cover land use, which is actually existing there, and then finally propose what it could be, like how it should be the actual versus how it should be. And finally, in relation with the issue of imboc or water hyacinth, I have a background of biology, and I was also making some reading on it. And if you are interested, I can comment on that later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you,
okay. Thank you for all presenters for this nice presentation. And let me go direct to my question. My question is to Dr. Mulugeta, but whether Lamlam or Dr. Almaso can give an answer or a comment on this. Ethiopia is suffering with recurrent drought and in securing food sufficiency. But as Dr. Mulugeta stated, especially in Nile or Abai and tributaries, there are 48 million people living in this area, Nile and tributaries areas. And also these areas are 52 to 54% of these areas irrigable land. My question is, if we have 52 to 54% of the land in Abai or tributaries areas, and if we have 48 million people there, why Ethiopia is still tolerating for this lengthy negotiation in sacrificing the interest of 48 million people? Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. I think I will give the chance to Lemlem, then Emmanuel, because they are really rushing to to leave. They have a number of other commitments as well. So let's try to make the answers also short so that we leave in few minutes. Lemlem first, and then Emmanuel, Dr. Emmanuel.
Thank you, Dr. Safari. I will start by answering the question that is raised by a participant, Antana Burru, on the existence of a common definition on equitable and reasonable right between Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan. Unfortunately, we don't have an agreed on definition on what amounts to equitable and reasonable utilization of the water resource of the Nile. And in the negotiations, this is a major impediment, because for Egypt and Sudan, equitable and reasonable use is the existing use that is already established by the 1959 and the previous treaties they have concluded. For Egypt, equitable and reasonable utilization is maintaining the full capacity of the Aswan Dam, maintaining the full capacity of the canals that it built to take to transfer the Nile water out of its basin. For Ethiopia, those projects did not really consider its right to utilize water resources of the Nile, and if we are to adhere to the existing use of Egypt and Sudan over the water, it would amount to saying we don't really have a right to use the waters of the Nile. So that's an area where we will not resort to. For Ethiopia, equitable and reasonable utilization has to be established by a comprehensive water treaty. A comprehensive water treaty which should be concluded under the framework of the CFA. As was alluded by the previous presenters, the CFA establishes the Nile Basin Commission. The Nile Basin Commission is expected to, when it's functional, is expected to bring the countries together and also help in the negotiation of different instruments, including a water sharing agreement. And that water sharing agreement is expected to determine what is equitable and reasonable right of the equitable and reasonable right of Ethiopia, what is the equitable and reasonable right of Egypt and Rwanda and Tanzania and Uganda is supposed to be determined by a water allocation, a water sharing, or any procedural instrument that is supposed to be concluded by among the three countries. So we don't really have an agreed on definition on what amounts to equitable and what amounts to reasonable. In fact, the major point of discord between our three countries is the definition of what is equitable and reasonable utilization and what is significant harm really. Under the DOP, you probably have looked at it. It says the countries will respect equitable and reasonable utilization and the obligation not to cause significant harm. But on what am I supposed to refrain from causing a significant harm? On the existing use of Egypt and Sudan, that is a problem because the existing use in Egypt and Sudan zeroes in Ethiopia's right, in fact, the right of all the upper riparian countries to utilize the Nile resources. So we have this kind of, I think, first degree agreement on what to call the principles, but we don't really have an agreement on what they mean on the ground. And that is really the core of our disagreement when it comes to our negotiations on the GERD, as well as our interactions on the comprehensive framework, cooperative framework agreement. If you look at Article 19B of the CFA, Egypt and Sudan exited the CFA negotiations because they wanted existing use to be the basis for the determination of water security. Existing use still, which is established, as I have said, by usage, by actual usage that really excluded, discriminated against the upper riparian countries is the main problem, and that is also the main factor for us to have a disagreement over what is equitable and reasonable utilization and to what extent goes the obligation not to cause significant harm. I believe this was the main legal question that was raised for me. I will leave the rest of the questions for the other participants to reflect on. I have to run to another meeting. I really apologize for leaving early.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lemlem, for coming. I hope we'll have more meetings, more opportunities to discuss further. Thank you. Dr. Emmanuel, please.
Yeah, I can just complement what she has said. the CFA, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the CFA, of course, tries in Article 4 to provide a definition for equitable and reasonable utilization, mentioning, of course, factors. But as has been said, it's difficult on the ground sometimes to agree on some of these things. They mention geographic, hydrographic, hydrological, climate, socioeconomic needs, population dependent on the water resources, the effects of the use of the water resources in one basin state to another one, existing and potential. So lots of things were listed, and some of them, of course, potentially can cause conflict with each other. But as a recognition of this, there was an annex also to the CFA that was supposed to deal with this, that if all the countries had signed, that the Nile Basin Commission would be given 6 months to come up with something more concrete. And of course, since we have not gone beyond this point yet, then we don't have the commission. But there is some attempt to define what is equitable and reasonable utilization if you download this document about the CFA. And that's one thing I'll say. Someone talked about having an integrated management of the Nile Basin. I think this is one of the things that's the principle really behind the formation of the NBI and the Commission. Already, for example, if you interface with the NBI, they have a basin-wide model, and there's already sharing of data between the different countries that they send to the NBI. They have a decision support system and all that. But of course, it ends mostly today just modeling and looking at what happens and testing scenarios. It's not yet something legal and usable in actual operation of or sharing of water resources. But the basis and for something like that is there. It's just that it's the political side of things has to develop first, get agreements, and then you are able to start thinking, okay, could we agree? How do we agree on this? Should we have an integrated basin operation system, which takes into consideration maybe seasonal needs and things like that? For the moment, it's all based on bilateral and trilateral agreements to keep things going. But eventually, if the CFA is operational for everybody else, we already have the basis through the existing NBI, which will transform itself into whose roles will be transformed to the new Basin Commission if all countries or if enough countries ratify this CFA. Unfortunately, that's the last question I can answer because we're already 1 hour over and I have another commitment. So I would like to thank, before I go, thank you for the invitation. And in case I can answer any other questions, I'll be willing to provide an email. You can just forward them to my email. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Malil. I know we were getting a bit late. So finally, there is 3 questions directed to Professor. One related to sediment, whether that threatens the longevity of GERD, and also the land cover issue on the GERD area, and also the Nile narrative from the African perspective for education from Dr. Salamo. And there was also a question from Leo for Mulgeta. So I think if Professor can summarize and answer these questions before we close. You are muted.
Muted.
You are muted, Professor.
Yeah, thank you for not. I know all of us are running out of time, so I'll quickly go through the questions. Now, let me start with Dr. Desalegns' question. Sedimentation is a serious issue. The root we know is erosion, then transported to respective sites like GERD, Rosaries, Sinar, and so on. Then when GERD is filled, it starts to settle much of the sediment that used to go downstream, for example, to shorten the life of rosaries. But by itself, why it is doing so? By itself, the moment it starts trapping sediments to settle within itself, it starts shortening its life. Normally, in any design, we have a certain space left for such sediments, a provision left for sediments. But we have to always understand that the ultimate destiny of reservoirs is to be filled with sediment. What we can do about is trying to elongate the life of the reservoir by reducing the causes of the sediments, means protecting the land from erosion. It simply means that trying to use different techniques, and in particular, encouraging vegetation to grow on the land. And such activities, as I have mentioned earlier, are not the job of the government alone. The government can help the people, users of the land, by designing and declaring and implementing appropriate policies that encourage them to protect their land. That's very important. Such policies, if they also get into the education system, start designing appropriate educational curriculums that deals with this problem, all the way from kindergarten up to the universities, awareness can do miracle. A lot can be done with that. So that is very important. And the head of this is, according to my conceptualization, is to go in the right direction in the process of democracy. It has to come to not only government, but to our way of life. And coming again to Dr. Yuhune's question, partly it is answered. Maybe if I have not catch it, you will help me. The way to handle this problem, it doesn't need a special attention only for GERD's catchment. All other basins we have, most of them are transboundary rivers. You can start from Baro Akobo, Gibe Omo, Ganaledawa, Wabi Shabale, Takaze, Awash itself. All these are transboundary rivers by definition. The only one which is closed within the land is Rift Valley systems. And also there are some pockets here and there. So all of them, if you want to do something on the river, the catchment treatment has to precede such actions. Struggle your best to keep the soil at its position where it can utilize, where it can benefit everybody. If it goes away, it creates problem. Not loss of fertility and the like, but also loss of our reservoirs' life. It can be done simultaneously. I can see good signs like tree plantation, but if people are only focusing on the tree, if they forget what is underneath the tree, then they can't help much, as I have shown in that slide. So whatever it is, people's participation, the trust between the government and people, and everything is so important to listen every beneficiary, whether they are educated or not. They are attached with the problem. The solution is within themselves. So everybody has to work hard to build their capacity, to encourage them morally, and also knowledge-wise. If they have missed it, something, knowledge has to be right, accessible to those people. So with this type of technique we can do, and regarding the Wonzelage or other principles or thoughts that we have already lived in our society, this has to go to also within the education system. As of now, I don't know whether things are done in that way. We are just scrambling our country with ethnic disease, but that can be over. Our children will be totally free of that disease. That's my hope, and that is the indication that I observed. So if we do that, as Norwegians or Sweden people or any other European are doing, at kindergarten level, awareness, sufficient information about environment, about the rights they have, everything at kindergarten level can take them a long way. We are missing that even at the university level in our country, but the education can do miracle if it is handled all the way through from our small children at nursery, kindergarten, to the university researchers and so on. So that is my wish, and that is practically what these admirable people have achieved. It doesn't take much time, because if you follow others the right way, already up and downs can be reduced by doing that. They haven't reached here by going all the way in a straight line. There have been downs and ups. But if we are good learners, we can shorten our up and downs. That is what I'm saying. Thank you very much. I'm happy that you organized such a meeting, and I will be always with you whenever you need me.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Dr. Mulgeta, short.
Yeah, I just want to reflect on two of the questions raised by FCE. Yeah, maximizing the benefit of the Nile Basin water. Yeah, actually the NBAI, the Nile Basin Initiative, was actually formed to achieve the benefit sharing of water and the development of the Nile in a sustainable manner. It has actually on the onsite, it had two action plans. One is a strategic action plan, and the other one is the shared vision program. The shared vision program was to create enabling environment so that all the basin countries can be connected together and develop projects in a sustainable manner. That somehow is to reach to a negotiated cooperation, and then form the Nile Basin Commission at the end to oversee development within the Nile Basin countries. The other one was the strategic action program, which actually is to find a cooperation platform between 2-3 Nile Basin countries and develop projects in a way that will benefit the citizens of those countries. So, for example, in the Eastern Bloc, in the Sudan, Ethiopia, and Egypt, there is intro, and then for Equatorial, there is Nile Sub. So, the reason why GERD was actually surfaced was the failure of the negotiation to develop 4 cascade projects upstream of GERD. So these projects, during the negotiation, the funding possibilities were blocked by Egypt. Then Ethiopia has no option other than going it alone. And that was the reason that GERD has surfaced. But this is not only the part of the story, but there have been several projects within Nile Basin or the Ethiopian Nile, like the Tanabeles project, the Luero project, and the irrigation projects downstream of Tekeze, and many small other projects, whereby all the funding mechanisms were objected and blocked by Egypt. So the narrative here is very clear. That is to deny Ethiopia not to develop its own resource within its own sovereign right. This attitude has not been changed, and I think it will take some time to maybe to go away. But then initiatives and negotiations and everything has to go on. The reason why we organized this webinar is actually to clear some of the misunderstanding, misinformation to the media, to the policymakers, and to concerned citizens. We have seen that the media is also fueling some of the issues with unsubstantiated reporting and one-sided reporting, and more or less they report in a way they like. So this will degrade the confidence between the Nile Basin countries, especially between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. So confidence building has to be there, but the media has to also take its own responsibility or engage itself in a constructive manner. The perception that Egyptians are victims of upstream Nile Basin countries is only a perception that's in the mindset. But in reality, it is the downstream countries who are actually benefiting more from the Nile, and it's the upstream countries who are suffering more, despite that they generate or contribute much to the resource of the Nile Basin. So yeah, efforts have been there, but the future is a negotiated settlement and peaceful coexistence in the Nile Basin, and I hope that will make fruit, and to see that the cooperation will go forward, and some of the perceptions, the Egyptian perceptions, will cede during the course of time. I think, yeah, I have tried to answer both for FC and Leo, but if you have further questions, you can direct it to me or to Ferry with email or whatever means you have, so that we can give you further information on some of the issues that you have in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mulugeta, and thank you again, all the presenters and also the participants who have really sacrificed a lot. I don't know where you are, but in Bergen, it seems a nice weather, so very rare to have such a nice weather. So you all have definitely sacrificed a lot to come here. I see so many questions in the chat room. That tells me that we need to have more webinar meetings like this. So I think we take note of those questions and we'll try to communicate with you. With that, I think, like I said earlier, we would like to thank the Norwegian, the Ethiopian community in Norway, IMPO, and the Ethiopian embassy, who has really played a big role on this. I hope your communication and cooperation with us will continue. And with this, I give the final closing remark, who has played a big role in organizing this with our group, the Ethiopian Common Forum in Norway. So you have 2-3 minutes to close this, and we are done. Getachew.
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll not take 3 minutes. In fact, I would like to wind up within 2 minutes. On behalf of the Ethiopian Common Forum as organizer for this webinar, I would like to thank His Excellency Ambassador Deriva. He's an ambassador for Nordic countries, and Mr. Lemessa Fisaha. Mr. Lemessa, he's also from Ethiopian Embassy and the whole staff of Ethiopian Embassy at Stockholm. And I'd like just to forward also my thanks on behalf of Ethiopian Common Forum for Ms. Lemlem Fisaha. She's the Director General of International Legal Affairs at Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Ethiopia. And I'd like to pass my special thanks for 3 presenters, Dr. Mulugeta, Professor Admasu, and Dr. Emmanuel. Especially Dr. Mulugeta was one of the mobilizers for the expertise, and he did a lot to mobilize and just make this webinar as a very good standard presentation. So I would like just my special presentation also to Dr. Mulugeta, and as well as for Professor Admasu and Dr. Emmanuel. And we'd like also to thank for Ethiopian community in Norway and the IT team, Dr. Shaggao, Yeheno, and all the participants, including the chairman of Ethiopian community. Our moderator, in fact, Dr. Tafari, you did late, and it's lots, and it's a very good job. And I would like to thank you for your very effective moderating this webinar. And I would like also to thank distinguished guests and all ladies and gentlemen. As you know that I would like just to say few words about Ethiopian Common Forum. Ethiopian Common Forum is a civic organization, and it is in fact registered under the Norwegian law, and it has also a number of discussions in Norway, and we had for example, in 2020, this is our 3rd meeting, including the whole meeting before COVID-19 come into being. And regarding the GERD, this is our 2nd meeting. Before 2 months, we did for the Ethiopian community in Norway, and it was a very interesting discussion. On this discussion or presentations, over 100 people are following us, including the webinar online and on the Facebook online. In fact, we have already sent a number of emails for the Norwegian organizations which have concerned on the GERD issue, directly or indirectly. As you know, that the GERD issue is a political, economic, and it's regional, and it's becoming also an international issue because the European Union and the United States government are just sitting as observer in all negotiations. In fact, it is an issue of Africa. We understand it very well. So from the Norwegian organizations, we have confirmed from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Norway, and we hope you are all those who have confirmed by email to attend this meeting are in and follow us. In fact, they may not have time to ask questions, and we would like just to promise for all of you, including your distinguished guests from Norway and Ethiopia, we'd have another meeting in similar issue because the GERD issue is not yet finished, and so we hope you will attend on the other meeting, and those who have not yet finished to forward your questions. You'll have chance on the next time. So just to wind up, I would like just to thank all of you, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you very much on behalf of Ethiopian Embassy to you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.